Our next question comes from our friend Abi. Abi has practiced Wing Chun and other martial arts for some time, and he had a discussion with a friend of his who basically said, "Why are you doing this? Are you planning on using that in a fight?" And Abi's honest answer was, I do this for fun. I like learning something new about my body every day. It's really interesting to me." But his friend pressed the question, basically like, you're wasting your time if this isn't practical for use in self-defense or street fighting or sport fighting or whatever. So Abi finished his question, pretty long email, but I'll summarize. His friend said, "Then why are you practicing it every day if you're not going to use it?" I said, "It's fun, man. It's cool to know something new every day about your body, how it responds and reshapes to our call and more." But his question still makes me wonder, is fun the only answer? Maybe it is, but still, why do I practice it if I don't even know if it's going to work if the need arises? And now doubt on a loop is making room within me. Should I carry on, or am I wasting my time? What do you think, sir? All right, Abi, that's a great question, man. In my opinion, there's really no wrong reason to get out there and train. You know that thing I tell you after every one of these videos, thanks for watching, get out there and train. There's no wrong reason to do that. If your motivation is fun, cool, do that. If your motivation is self-defense, that's fine. If your motivation is cage fighting, cool. If your motivation is you want to develop some killer abs to look good on the beach, great. There's no wrong reason to get out there and train. But yeah, man, I get it. As an MMA coach, I often get this question from new students. "Hey, have you ever used your martial arts in real life?" And I kind of look at them blinking like, well, I was a professional fighter, right? They're like, no, real life. What they mean is, do I ever get into street fights? They want to hear some entertaining street fighting stories. And that's nonsense, man. That's nonsense. Street fights are nonsense. I'm not talking about aggravated assaults when somebody jumps out and for no good reason assaults you. Street fights, when I say that, I'm talking about two guys getting mad at each other over emotions, fighting over emotions, and doing something really, really dumb. Man, I just saw this clip of a street fight today between two young women. And they go out there, they're squared up like they're going to box. One wraps her arm around the other girl's head as they tie up. And the bigger girl lifts her opponent up, spikes her on the head. Boom. Dead. All over in about 10 seconds. And I'm looking at this. I watched it on loop about 10 times, just trying to process it. Not the technique, not what happened technically, but what happened emotionally. These two young women with their whole lives in front of them are willing to fight to the death to make these life-altering decisions that are going to put them both in a very bad, dark place forever, based on a momentary lapse of reason because of emotions. Now, one of these young women is a killer, and she has to live with that for the rest of her life on her conscience, and the other one is either paralyzed below the neck or dead or otherwise seriously, seriously injured. You just can't walk away from that. And then if you look at aggravated assaults and think of unarmed martial arts as a way to solve that problem. I remember some time ago I was planning to make a video about the difference between street fights and aggravated assaults, and I decided against it because the footage I was looking at would be pulled down from YouTube immediately, and this channel would be flagged. I mean, it's just real violence. I found this video, one of the first videos I found. A convenience store was the target of this attack. This young woman walked in with an axe. An axe. Big old axe. Starts swinging it around and just chopping people down. A young woman. Just out of her mind. Assaulting strangers, killing people. who don't even see it coming. They don't hear her coming. She doesn't announce herself. She just walks in and starts hacking people. Kills a couple, seriously injures several others before anyone even realizes what's going on, and she walks right out again. How does any level of martial arts training prepare you for that? I mean, it doesn't. It's a surprise attack. You see a young woman walk into a convenience store. Generally, the last thing on your mind is, this girl is going to attempt to decapitate me with an axe. That just doesn't really enter the mind, right? So, in the case of aggravated assaults from psychopaths, we generally don't see that coming, man. Let's talk about Frank Dux for a minute. I know Frank Dux has a bad reputation on the internet for some very outlandish claims and the story behind Bloodsport and all that, but he actually has a really good video on knife fighting. And I don't remember what it's called, but he's giving an interview about knife fighting. He's walking down the street. Some guy's asking him, like, hey, Frank, how would you defend against a knife? And he says something super sobering about the reality of an aggravated assault. He said, look, if somebody wants to kill you with a knife, they're not going to advertise it. They're going to walk right past you like nothing's going on and then shank you in the side, not even showing you that there's a knife there, and then they will walk on. You don't do a kung fu disarm against that. You can't defend yourself against something you can't see coming. And unfortunately, that is the reality of a great deal of aggravated assaults. It's guerrilla warfare. I mean, look at United States history, for example. The American colonies, once part of the British Empire. The British, at the time, the most powerful nation on planet Earth, with the greatest military might, the greatest navy, the most territory, etc. And these 13 tiny colonies, poorly outfitted, they decide to wage war against the world's greatest military force. With the equivalent of, how can I put this? They were poorly outfitted. They were freezing. They were starving. They did not have the type of weapons and ammunition and supplies and training, etc., to defeat this military power. So what happened? The invention of guerrilla warfare. Instead of lining up in ranks to fight the old-timey way as they did in formations, which is a throwback of melee combat, before firearms were invented, the Americans had this crazy idea. Let's not announce ourselves. Let's hide in the bushes. Let's hide in the trees. Let's be snipers. Let's do surprise attacks. Let's forget about honor in warfare. We're killing each other after all, and we want to win, so we'll do what it takes. And I'm sure that was incredibly shocking back then. That was incredibly revelatory back then, but man, changed warfare forever. But that's what an aggravated assault is. It's guerrilla warfare. It's not playing by the rules. It's not, lining up and announcing yourself saying, here's my knife, now I'm going to attack you with it. Ah, here it comes, try to stop it. No, man. Somebody who wants to do you harm is going to find a way to do that. Unfortunately. So, yeah, Abi, going back to your Wing Chun. If you love to do it, man, do it. I don't train martial arts because I'm working under any delusion that my cage fighting skills are going to stop a knife or a gun or somebody who sneaks up behind me unannounced on the street or whatever. I mean, if somebody has a sniper rifle pointed at my head from a distance and they are intent on killing me, that's what's going to happen, bearing an act of God. And that's not why I train in martial arts. I train in martial arts because I love it, because it brings me immense joy and satisfaction. And it's difficult to explain that to the for the streets crowd, who believes that it's not worth your time, attention, and effort unless It allows you to become this invincible superhero on the streets. Which is a fantasy, that's an illusion. It's a power fantasy. Let's talk about Elder Scrolls for a minute. I like video games. You guys play Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, Daggerfall, those games? They're role-playing games. And some people say, oh yeah, I play Skyrim, I'm a nerd. No, you're not. Skyrim is pop culture now. Skyrim did something that the other Elder Scrolls games didn't. It departed from the original nerdy role-playing D&D type of aspect of the medieval fantasy, and it turned it into a power fantasy, which is something the average non-nerd is very willing to get behind. So you can create this character who is essentially the chosen one from the get-go, and you go out there and just become more and more and more powerful as the game goes on, and then boom, you're godlike at the end, and it's fun. But the replay value, I think, is pretty low because of that massive departure from realism. Realism is life is hard, life doesn't work like that. And role-playing, while it has fantastic elements like magic and dragons and elves and things like that, is still based on the idea of realism. You have to work for what you get. You're not granted chosen one status, basically. You're playing a role, right? So what does this have to do with Wing Chun and martial arts? In a way, it's kind of live-action role-playing for many people in the most literal sense. They put on a costume. They dress up like a ninja or a samurai or something like that. They pick up a weapon. They reenact scenes of combat based on things that may have happened historically, maybe. And that's okay. Live-action role-playing? Cool. Why not? Do it. If it brings you joy, if it brings you happiness, do it. Ritual combat, if that brings you joy, if that brings you happiness and satisfaction in your life, cool. Do it. And by ritual combat, I mean any situation where we make an agreement to fight, right? Where two guys understand we are going to have a consensual fight. And there's going to be some structure, there's going to be a starting point, there's going to be a ritual behind it. Are you ready? Are you ready? Fight. That's a ritual right there. But you don't get ritual combat in an aggravated assault. Somebody sneaking up behind you and whacking you in the back of the head with a hard object. That's not a fight, that's an assault. It's a very different thing. Anyway, so if you love Wing Chun, you don't need to give an explanation for the streets about why you love it. And that goes for any martial art. No matter how badass and tough that martial art seems, or how wimpy and weak that martial art may seem, yeah, you don't owe anybody an explanation about why, if it's what you love to do. Now, if you're working under delusions, that's another thing entirely. If you're working under the delusions that your martial art is going to stop a bullet, that's silly, that's wrong, that's bad, and stop it. If you're working under delusions that your martial art is going to give you a spider sense and allow you to perceive a unprovoked aggravated assault from a stranger who sneaks up behind you and tries to whack you in the head or stab you in the guts unannounced, then that's delusional. That's power fantasy. Get out of the mythical realm of Skyrim and come back to Earth. Yeah. Stop it. Be honest about what you do. Martial arts, as I always say, is a pursuit of the truth. So pursue that truth, my friends. Thanks for watching. Get out there and train.